Okay, so today's lecture is on Persepolis, the movie. And this movie was based on the graphic novel by the same name by Marjan Satrapi, which was published in serial format through several years in France. A small publishing house published Persepolis narratives drawn in black and white ink, black ink on white paper, actually. And all of a sudden, the book gained international acclaim and international attention. So the movie was produced afterwards by the author and her friends. So the author herself had a strong hand about, you know, imagining how the movie went. However, the book, the comics, and the film are very different. For those of you who have read the comics will notice that the comic book is much funnier and lighter in spirit as opposed to the film, which is more melancholic, you could say. It's darker, it feels it's heavier and sadder. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Persepolis, the movie. Okay, so what is, we'll call the main character Margie or Margie based on the author's name, which is Marjan, right? But we want to distinguish between the author and the character. Why? Because this is although it's not fictional, it's based on the life stories of the author, but we can never truly, represent ourselves in a work of art. What I mean by that is there are elements of fiction infused into works of nonfiction as well. And so we kind of distinguish, although it is about Marjan Satrapi, we still distinguish the speaker or the author as a character, right? So we call it Margie for that reason. And also based on the fact that memory is very fluid, right? Sometimes we remember things and sometimes the way we remember things is colored by the mood we are in right now. And traumatic memories are usually blurry. For those of you who have unfortunately been in traumatic situations such as, I don't know, an accident and a revolution, a war, things like that, being exposed to violence, it's very, our unconscious mind tries to help us by wiping clean our memory of that incident. However, another part of the unconscious mind tries to solve that mystery by giving us continual flashbacks of what happened. So for example, a person who has been in a train crash, this is an example given by Freud, the moment of crash is wiped from their memory. However, they constantly have nightmares of a crash. That moment of, where everything is tumbling down and there's blackouts or whatever. So although it's wiped clean, it's also a recurring incident because our unconscious mind is trying to solve that kind of enigma or mystery. So the same thing with memories recounted in an autobiography, excuse me, about adolescence, about war, about revolution, about violence, all of that. It's murky. Memories are murky. So we have this Margie, the main character, a child, very lively and energetic, and her childhood is kind of marred by revolution and war that she witnesses. And then she goes to the West to escape kind of that mayhem, the at the beginning of the revolution. And it's very early for like a teenager to leave home and at the age of 16 to go live in another country. And so she's faced with all these problems. First of all, xenophobia, that means the hatred of people who are other, hatred of others, people who don't look like us. So she faces a lot of that in Austria. At the same time, she has lost her homeland, her motherland, her sense of security. So migration and the experience of living in diaspora has been very heartfelt for her. So she overcomes this kind of personal challenges. How? By the simple stories that her grandmother tells her, by that sense of belonging that she feels to a culture, to a cuisine, to a land, all of that, and also by her personal strength. Okay, that's a picture of young Marjan Satrapi on the left. She's much older now, and a character with her grandmother weaving. So one way to go about like analyzing the film, there are so many perspectives you could take. One way is to look at the main characters, okay? And the main character here is Margie. We call her the cartoon avatar. Avatar is like the little representation cartoon format of her. We have a little child with big dreams. She wants to be God or a prophet. She wants to change the world. She wants to take all the pain away from the loved ones, as most children do. And what takes that childhood innocence away? Well, everybody goes through that period, which is a very turbulent time in our lives, the coming of age. She goes through that period of coming of age while her country, her homeland, is also going through that coming of age turbulence and all those dilemmas that come with it. So she's caught between, dichotomies, you could say, tradition of her culture and modernity. She's caught between maybe living a happy, idyllic life, or at the same time being responsible for social movements in her country, being a political agent, being an activist. So we see her grandmother as this source of solace and tradition, and not in a religious way, but in a kind of good nature, good personness. So her grandmother is always giving advice on how to be good, how to live a life that's meaningful. Whereas we see that Margie has a lot of tension with her mother and her father to some extent. We can see why later. So she wants justice, and these are from the comic books that I've cut off from you, and this is from the book. And another character that we see this idea, the sense of justice, social justice and fairness that she's always after. We see that dream being shattered when her uncle is killed. So before the revolution, he was a member of the communist party, the socialist actually, and so they were prosecuted by the Shah, by the king. And after the revolution, the new regime, they also went after the left, and they also prosecuted and killed a lot of the activists. So they were chased by both regimes, the old and the new, and the uncle is caught there. And we see that the parents have kind of given up hope because they fought so much for freedom, for justice, and everything turned just spiraled downwards, but she still kind of has hope. And we see one of the clips that we see a lot about this movie is this one, that well, in Iran, just at the beginning of the revolution, not so much anymore, we could say, there was a lot of like attention of trying to fight the signs of the West, such as, I don't know, punk or alcohol or revealing clothes or ties, just the signs, trying to fight those. And they noticed that how silly that is, because people rebel, people don't like their even silly freedoms to be curbed by the state or the government. So if the Western colonization wants to be critiqued, it doesn't mean that people's tastes have to be curbed in music or things like that. However, the kind of problems that she faces in the West are very different. For example, as soon as she goes there, she becomes an outsider. She talks about how she looks different, how her concerns are different, her political are not as, and how this calm society is kind of gives her anxiety because there's so much going on in the world. People are being killed, regimes are being toppled, and there's nothing in Austria, there's nothing going on. So she was talking about how headline of the news is a panda having escaped from the zoo, whereas any other country in the world has headlines about so many more important things. So she becomes friends with the outcasts. And one reason is that because she feels like an outsider, and she goes to this dark phase of feeling completely other than alienated from her society, her culture, her family, because she's away. both physically and mentally. When she returns home, she has this kind of reawakening through somehow, maybe it's through sports, but not just that, but through finding a meaning and a connection. And then she becomes a student at the university studying arts. Um, and I want to hear your perspectives as well about how you felt these challenges that Margie faces. To some extent, they are very unique to the situation of Iran, around the 80s, the war, the revolution, and all of that. But some of them are universal. Some of the troubles she had are universal. So if you could identify maybe with any of the challenges that she's faced with, we can have a discussion about that. And also whatever that caught your eye or attention. So we'll do that. So I'll stop the recording. Bye.